And we're live. It is Wednesday, July 28th, 2021, 5:02 p.m. We are 2 minutes late because Genevieve and I got engrossed in a conversation with our guest. And, rather than bringing y'all into it, we just, let time get away from us. I have a very important announcement today, which is that I have not yet watched yesterday's show, and so I still do not know the full Christopher Argyris story. But I want to welcome Christopher back. I hear he is out of the hospital. Is that right, Genevieve?
That is right. He got out yesterday.
And I saw that he was at least momentarily on the show yesterday. So welcome back. Christopher's ordeal is a reminder to you all that breakthrough infections happen, even if you've been completely virtuous and you're not one of the people that Jonathan Last wants to fire off into the sun. It is still a scary place out there, so be careful. And if you are one of the people who has not been vaccinated, the breakthrough infections are your fault, every single one of them. And so you know what to do, remedy that. We are still not allowed to have fun anymore. But in lieu of fun, we are allowed to talk to JVL. And a lot of you know JVL. Some of you don't. He is the editor of the Bulwark. He is a cantankerous, genteelly misanthropic gentleman who I just want to say has been on a campaign against me on a number of podcasts, two in particular. And I just want to say it's time that we buried the hatchet, Jonathan. And so welcome to In Lieu of Fun, and please stop saying mean things about me on various Bulwark productions.
I feel like this is such a wonderful moment of growth for both of us, because in the green room is when we realized that the only thing that's come between us is that we have this one unobtainable woman who we both love, and we both want her to love us back. And
more than the other one.
And not only does she not love us back, but she holds both of us in mild contempt. And so this is great. This is like a little therapy session. Genevieve can help us work through our feelings here, and I'm sure it'll all be really good for us. I'm looking forward to a lot of I feel statements. And yeah. I want you to know that I'm in a receiving mode for whatever it is that you need to express, Benjamin.
Well, I would like to express a few things. First of all, that I wish that you had invited me to hike the Appalachian Trail, because I think a lot of this could have been avoided, because I would love to hike the Appalachian Trail. And so that's the first thing. And it hurt me that you didn't, and that's really why the French Village podcast exists.
Well, it may come to that, because in my quest to find somebody to hike the damn thing with me, I have gone through Sarah Longwell, my mother-in-law. I've got like a whole list of people. Everybody has said no. So, I mean, eventually I'm going to get to your name on my list.
Yeah, which shows you how far down the list. I'm below the mother-in-law on people you'd want to hike the Appalachian Trail.
Oh, no, my mother-in-law's the best. I can't even tell you. The idea of getting to go to hike the AT with my mother-in-law is the best. She's actually my 1A. Like, if Sarah is my first round draft pick for that, mother-in-law is 1B. She's amazing.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Oh, she's the best. She is the best. I do a little hobby podcast that I keep like super double secret from everybody. And the episode where I had her on, and the two of us like just sat there drinking together, and unbelievable. It's just magic.
Now, does she hike normally, or is it just this particular trail?
Oh no, she's a quilter. She is not an outdoor cat, and in large part, that's why it would be so amazing.
Wow.
And I mean, of course, all of this is fantasy. I got like four kids, two of whom are reasonably young. But it's aspirational. I want to do an aspirational through hike.
Please, Ben, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So what I was going to say, though, is you could make it a reality, though, if you broke it into parts, because it's just the whole thing done at once. Or is that part of the allure?
Yeah, I am, to be honest. So first of all, the idea of section hiking it, which seems like kind of okay, but reality is almost harder. And B, when I sat and thought it through, I realized that's like a 45-year project for me. It's at that point, why not just quit your job for 6 months?
So serious question though. You're obsessed with Pelotons.
Yeah.
Peloton has a nice big screen. Somebody has to have videoed the Appalachian Trail from end to end. Like, could you Peloton hike the Appalachian Trail?
Pretend you're biking the AT?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's none of it is undoable on a mountain bike.
Peloton has a lot of really nice nature trails. Genevieve, so you're into Peloton too? Yes.
I do like Peloton. I've been temporarily sidelined from it for the past couple of months, but I'm planning on getting back in. Yeah.
What's wrong? What happened?
Nothing wrong. It's just that the things that I like to do are a little too high impact, and so I've got to wait.
Oh,
yeah.
Did Jess King? Did she yell at you on?
No.
Leanne Hainsby. Cody was very cross with something you did. You high-fived the wrong person.
I was too cheerful. They just said, honey, that there is a line between optimism and obnoxiousness, and you've crossed it.
Yeah, that's funny. I just got the Peloton not that long ago, and it's amazing. It is everything that everybody says it is. And I have started branching out not only from the bike part of it, but to the outdoor runs and to some of the meditation. And on a lark a few weeks ago, I tried yoga, which is something that I would have mocked even 12 months ago, let alone if you go back to me, in my college days when I was a varsity rower and said I was in this amazing shape and, I could wake up at 3 a.m. and just go run 7 miles and come home and go back to sleep. And said, yeah, someday you're going to be so old and broken that you're going to they'll feel like doing yoga for 30 minutes is your speed. I'd have been like, kill me now. Instead, I love it. I wind up feeling both calm and relaxed, but also grounded. And it's great. So now yoga's all I want to do.
Now, so explain to me about yoga. How does yoga interact with your other spiritual commitments?
Yeah, it's funny. I get the sense that in yoga, you're not encouraged to hate the whole world around you. And so that's hard. I have to turn that off when I'm on the mat. So when I'm working on my practice, as we say,
yes.
I have to put aside a lot of the day-to-day concerns that I carry with me about how terrible people are and about how we're all doomed and everything is futile. And maybe that's good for me. Maybe it's good to, flip the telescope around and look at it through the other end. I don't know. So do you also namaste? Genevieve?
I do not. I have spent a lot of time over the last 15 years doing martial arts. But I've never done yoga seriously. I've done Aikido and Taekwondo. But
so that's the opposite of yoga. That's the practice of trying to hurt other people.
Well, but they're much more closely related than you would expect. Focus on things like flexibility, groundedness can be very similar, and I think Aikido in particular is a kind of walking combat yoga, I think of it as it's as close to yoga as I get. And I do think, the combination of sort of yoga with hurling people to the ground is kind of appeals to me.
Yeah, I can see that. A lot of it is I have been my oldest kid just turned 13, and I don't know if you guys have kids or not. It's you always expect oh yeah, sure, this is what the cycle of life, right? Your child will outstrip you athletically. I didn't expect it to happen so early, And by age 12, like I could no longer take him out for a run with me.
Oh,
Like
wow.
he was just too fast, and he's wanting to do like 630 miles, and I'm like, dude, I'm gonna die. I couldn't do that 630 mile with a skateboard. And
You can
yes.
alternate the training though, and like set up some kind of rig where he's pulling you for the second half of the run.
Yeah, maybe if he he's a speed parachute he works
Yeah.
out with sometimes. Like
Yeah.
maybe make him run the whole thing with the parachute on.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's a lot of things where stuff I used to do with my oldest kid I can't do with him anymore, and so now I have to go and find things that he finds so contemptible that I know I won't have to break it. Because when I'm like, hey, I'm gonna go do some yoga, want to come with me, Flash? He rolls his eyes like, yeah.
Well, I have one for you. If you're into yoga and you're into the Peloton, you should spend a few $100. It's the best piece of exercise equipment you will ever acquire is an Oculus Quest, and download the program Supernatural, as well as a boxing simulator called Fit XR. They are fabulous.
That's cool.
Truly fabulous cardio systems. And they are literally kind of otherworldly in their immersive qualities. And they don't invite strangers into your house to yell at you.
Yeah. So you are an Oculus guy?
For exercise reasons only. Yes.
Really?
I bought one thinking I was, as I explained to Kate, was interested. It was the beginning of lockdown. I was going to, for the first time in my life, get into gaming. And I thought, I've never really been into video games. I'm shut down in my house. Everybody else is, pretending to read. I'm not even going to pretend. I'm just going to get into video games. And all I want to do with it is work out.
Wait, so you didn't do video games when you were a kid? Because you and I are reasonably close in age. And so you were the prime Super Nintendo, original NES system.
So I'm a little older than you, I think.
Really?
I'm 51.
We're like 4 years apart.
Okay.
We're basically the same age. So you would have been like ColecoVision and the Atari 2600.
Yeah, so there were definitely and I was in middle school definitely into that stuff.
Yeah, and you went to the arcade at the mall with Jeff Spicoli,
yes,
right?
Yes, and then by the time I was in high school, I lost interest and didn't do it anymore, and really have not, other than Tetris, played a video game since. And so, but I was kind of interested in Oculus because, 3D immersive stuff. But on a lark, on the first couple days that I had it, I looked up the workout stuff. And that is now all I use it for. It's like the best piece of exercise equipment I've ever used.
That is fascinating.
That's also high praise.
Yeah, you had me when you said spend a couple $100, because I'm such a consumerist. I try to fill the hole in my heart by buying things, and so I was like, whatever's coming after this, I'm in.
So
I'm down for it.
I actually think we should have on the show, Genevieve, the people who designed and run Supernatural.
That would be cool.
I think it's the most fascinating. So what it does is it transports you to some of the most gorgeous places in the world. Tops of mountains, right above a smoking crater of a volcano, and these are rendered incredibly vividly in 360 degrees, and then things start flying at you. And you have baseball bats in your hand, and you have to hit them. And it is done to music. It is incredibly transportive. You really feel like you are standing on a platform on top of a lagoon in Borneo or something. And
whoa.
And depending on how you set the levels, the energy expenditure is really high. And I just think it's super imaginative and super interesting and great fun.
I feel like
Ben,
I would
how
like that a
much-
lot.
How much would I have to pay you to go put those goggles on right now so we can watch you playing?
So the answer is you wouldn't have to pay me anything. I would be happy to do it, but we shouldn't do it now because. But instead, what I will do is I will record a video of myself doing it, so you can see how goofy I look doing it.
Yes.
And B, I will record from the Oculus what I am seeing, and I will share them both with you.
Good, because I want to promise you that after Sarah sees you playing on the Oculus, I'll win.
I actually don't think so, because I think that
She's so anti-video game type stuff. She's like, oh, you boys with your video games.
But this isn't really like a video game though. It's an immersive experience.
I just want you to do it.
I do. It honestly sounds a lot like hockey, being a hockey goalie, which I did for a long time. So that sounds like fun.
Ice hockey or field hockey?
Ice.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, Mr. Last, let's talk about a few things that I think the audience has wanted to know for a long time that you never have explained.
Okay.
The V. Is it Victor?
It is.
Okay, just checking.
Yeah, it is. And I have it for the only reasons I have it is because growing up, I idolized George Will as a writer. And when I, got my first byline at the Weekly Standard, and they, like, so what should it be? And I was just like, if George F. Will, if having a middle initial in your name is good enough for George F. and Will, then it's good enough for me. I remember Fred Barnes saying, no middle initials, they're terrible. In fact, shouldn't even John. It should be John Last. I said, no, I can't do it. I've never been John in my life, and I stuck to my guns with the V. And I don't know if it was a mistake or not, because, then we went into the world of search algorithms, and I don't know if the SEO on having a middle initial is good or bad in your byline.
So I don't have a middle initial at all. And
Really?
I am just Benjamin Wittes, and I am have to say it is a nice combination to have no middle initial and to be the only Benjamin Wittes. So, like,
That is nice.
there's a, I think Kate has the same thing. There aren't any other Kate Kloniks, bylining around. But it's good because nobody searches for me and gets anybody else.
Yeah, you're. How about you, Genevieve? Do you have a middle name?
I do have a middle name, but I have no bylines, so this concern is not present in my world.
Let's share with the room anyway. What is your middle name?
It would be Genevieve A. De La Fera, Anne.
Oh, Anne.
Yes.
With an E or no E?
No E, surprisingly. Yeah, I think they were like, we've given you enough vowels in your first name that after this...
You've used up all your E's.
Exactly. It's too expensive if you ever have to go on a game show to buy all these vowels.
That's outstanding.
So, next question, somewhat serious. You are kind of the commie left of the Bulwark crowd. And
yes.
I am interested in that as a sort of psychological and intellectual experience. Like, the Bulwark crowd, I think, can be divided into, roughly speaking, into principled conservatives who took the conservatism seriously and didn't get tempted by the allure of Trump, such as it was. Moderates who are essentially rethinking some aspects of conservatism in a Charlie Sykes-like way. Were we wrong about X, Y, and Z? And who were kind of to one degree or another, drifting away from conservatism, but aren't interested in sort of signing up Max Boot-like with the other side, and you. And you seem to me to be in your own category, which is somebody who was never really comfortable with conservatism, but kind of hung out in that world anyway, principally for social conservative reasons, without kind of cultural reasons, without a commitment to any of the things that we think of as making up the modern conservative movement. And so I'm interested in your sort of psychodrama of like how you ended up, like what's a nice boy like you doing in a crowd like that, and why did you not, when you were like started wanting to fire Republicans into the sun in rocket ships and became as angry and disillusioned as you are, why did you just not walk away? What's the part that holds you to that, to the renegade part of that movement, despite your not really ever quite having been part of the movement at all?
That's an expansive question.
Yes.
So, I mean, I am, a bundle of contradictions, not least of which is that I wouldn't be doing any of this had I just gotten into medical school. So, had I gotten into medical school, we could have saved everybody a lot of trouble. And I would be an internist up at Monmouth County Hospital in central New Jersey. And hopefully I would not have killed anybody because my organic chemistry grades were too low. And, and it would be fine. I'd almost certainly be married to the same woman. We'd have the same kids. We literally would just have our life be different. I wouldn't be in this stuff. And all I would do is be reading some of this stuff on the side between dragging my kid around to baseball practice. The weirdness of, I was always interested in politics. I read the New York Times when I was, a seventh grader because I was just interested in the world around us. Loved. I saw somebody in the comments making fun of me for liking George Will. I think George Will is the great essayist of our time. The guy can do anything. He can write about baseball. He can write about his kid. He can write about politics. He can write about rock concerts. I remember him writing a column about going to a Bruce Springsteen concert in the late 1980s. He's
also a wonderfully sweet man, and I have a great meeting George Will story, which I will share later in the show after you're finished.
So anyway, but I would say to the point that I'm conservative, I've always been temperamentally conservative, though, which is believing essentially that however bad things might look right now, this is as good as it gets. And, tomorrow's going to be worse. And we forget about trying to make the world better. We got to just hold on to what we've got right now because things are likely to devolve and get much worse in the future because people are awful. And we need institutions and civilization to try to temper the bad effects of people. And so that is a fundamentally conservative view of the world around us in life, even if it's not super politically conservative in the way that we think about modern conservatism. And so I had that, but that was operating at the same time in my head as always a very deep suspicion of capitalism. I was always very much. Now I'm not actually a commie. We joke about this at the Standard. We joke about it at the Bulwark. The joke at the Standard was that I was the house commie. But I was much closer to Irving Kristol. I was maybe a 1.5 cheers for capitalism guy, because I think that you have to be able to both recognize that capitalism has lifted more people out of poverty than any other system in the world, has achieved an enormous amount of good, but also that left undirected and unguided can wind up getting into some really bad outcomes. And so long before we had nationalist populism, I was always on the side of, maybe we ought to pay attention to what's going on over here, because when big corporations capture the power of the state, then the truth is they would murder your grandmother if it got them 5 extra cents worth of profit this year and they thought they could get away with it.
It all sounds very Hobbesian and goes back to the suspicion of things operating without controls. So it makes sense.
Yeah, right. I mean, you can see it, I guess. There's a through. It may not be right, but there's a through line to it. But the truth is, a big part of the attraction for me to the conservative world, even though I wasn't a part of it, like I was sort of in but not of, was just the back in the day, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but it seems to me that that's where all of the really smart, really interesting people were. That's where Andy Ferguson was. That's where George Will was. That's where Bill Kristol was. And these were people who were, A, enormously smart, B, almost always operating in good faith, and C, were like extravagantly talented. Like I would read Andy Ferguson, wherever, whether it was The Spectator or in The Atlantic or in Time Magazine, and I would just be like, I want that. That's what I want to belong to. These are people who are just great writerly talents. And the Standard back then, I really think, again, I'm a lover of political magazines. I read all of them, and I love them all. I love the New Republic. I love the Atlantic. I love Mother Jones. Love the New Yorker.
And you loved the Claremont Review of Books.
God, I love the Claremont Review of Books. But especially early on, when it was like David Brooks, Chris Caldwell, Tucker Carlson, Matt Labash, David Tell, those early years of the Standard, I think, was as good as it gets for any weekly political magazine of the last 50 or 60 years.
I could not agree more. And, for those who gasped when you said Tucker Carlson, not the same person as he was as a young writer. And nobody, and I say this as somebody who wrote editorials for the Washington Post for 10 years, has written editorials like David Tell has before or since.
Yeah.
There was an amazing energy there. All right, I want to tell you a story to validate your sense of George Will's.
Tell me, and then I'll tell you my George Will stories, which are hysterical. So go ahead. Yours will be good.
Mine was, I was 27. Meg Greenfield had just hired me to write editorials for the Washington Post, which had a historic position against the death penalty, with which I agreed completely. I have always been varying degrees of passionately against the death penalty. And there was this one little problem, which was that Ted Kaczynski had just pled guilty, and boy, is it hard to make the case against the death penalty for Ted Kaczynski, particularly after some of the people testified whose arms he had blown off, and it was like bad stuff, And so I gamely wrote the editorial for the wall, with which I believed then, in which I believed then and believe now. Wrote the editorial against the death penalty for Ted Kaczynski, and George Will wrote a column in response, which began with the line, "The Washington Post has come out against the death penalty for Ted Kaczynski, ... the least the paper could do for one of its writers," which, for those of you who don't remember, the Washington Post had published, along with the New York Times, at the request of the FBI, the Unabomber's Manifesto. And so this was a savage column, and I felt it very directed at me. And which it was, no. And I had never met George Will before, but I was sort of in hiding under my desk mode in response to this column. Meg was very amused. And a few weeks later, I was invited by the then publisher of the Washington Post, Bo Jones, to a book party that he was holding for Carl Cannon, and I went to the book party, and who should be standing there but George Will, who I was introduced to, and I couldn't, sink into my seat. And I was introduced to him, and somehow it came up. I told him that I was doing the legal affairs editorials, and he looked at me pointedly and said, "Did you write that editorial about Ted Kaczynski?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "That was a very good editorial."
Hey!
And I was really taken aback. And I said, "Well, you wrote quite a savage column in response to it." He said, "Of course I did. You don't need to write a sharp column in response to a lousy editorial." And
wow.
could not have been more gracious, and was... I think of him in the department of a pleasure to disagree with, and I have gone back to that column a number of times and actually noticed that there was not a personal word in it. It was sharp, and it never questioned anybody's good faith, except in the department of that first line, which was, I think, a rhetorical excess that nobody could begrudge him. So I am very pro George Will.
That is awesome.
It's fantastic.
So I avoided him for 20 years because I held him in such, childishly high regard, that the prospect of meeting him and finding out that he was a jerk, it terrified me. It would be like losing my religion. And so I went to almost comical lengths to avoid meeting him because, it's a small town, right? And so it was like Three's Company level, Jack ducking out while Suzanne Summers is distracting Mr. Farley type stuff to not meet George Will. And
especially in conservative writer world, that's
really right. It's not a big city. And so I finally meet him in 2016, and I'm seated next to him at a lunch. And I don't talk to him the whole time, all lunch. I just, talk to whoever's on the other side of me instead. And, I just I'm going to get through this. I'm not going to talk to him. I'm not going to, don't want to keep him pristine in my. And then I finally wind up, he introduces himself to me at the end of lunch. And I was like a 15-year-old girl meeting the Beatles. It was one of the worst. I don't even remember what I said. But this ends 30 seconds after meeting him with me saying excusing myself and running out the door. And he then this is literally the coolest thing that has ever happened to me in Washington. A couple of years after that, he liked something I had written about my minor league baseball team down here in Northern Virginia, and he sent me a copy of Men at Work, his book about baseball. And he signed it and made it out to my kid, who's a huge baseball nut, which was amazing. And he invited me to come to a game with him. And I show up to a Nationals game, and it is me, George Will, and George's other friend, Hall of Famer Tony La Russa. So I sit down, and he's like, "Here's my friend Tony. I'm sure you recognize him." And I was like, "Hi, Mr. La Russa." What is happening here? And this is the single greatest indictment of Washington, D.C. ever. So all through the game, people kept coming up to us and asking Tony La Russa to take pictures of them with George Will. Not a single person recognized the guy who is, a Hall of Famer. He's wearing 2 World Series rings, one on each hand. These things are, 80 carats each or something. They're like the Hope Diamond. And the people recognize the Washington Post op-ed columnist and not the World Series champ legend from baseball. And I just thought that tells you everything you need to know about Washington, D.C.
Wow. All right. Let's go to audience questions. Paula, with a bug in your room, the floor is yours.
It's awful. There's a centipede and a spider, and I want to run out the room.
Be free.
So my question is what are your thoughts on, being efficient with communication versus being blunt, especially on controversial issues? And I'll give an example with vaccines. we could say, I mean, you could say, we could be as obvious as we want and say there is really no basis for thinking that Bill Gates is going to put a chip in your arm. And we can call out a lot of the misinformation and stupidity. But then I wonder, when it's an issue like, getting vaccines into people's arms, the cost of that versus, going to, local radio stations, getting people like Mitch McConnell to go out to his community. I think he just bought a lot of ads in his state to get that message out to people. How do you balance that while being blunt and efficient at the same time? I know there's a difference, right? I think like the Bulwark probably has a different audience than like NBC News. But I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
Who's the you're in that? Mine or the regs?
Yep, all yous are directed to you.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, when I think about this, when I'm being flip, I say things like, I'm on the side of Darwinism, or I like personal responsibility, and people should get the joy of experiencing the consequences of their decisions. But I do, and I'm very cognizant of the fact that talking about the unvaccinated creates a monolith where there is not one, right? I mean, you can break out the crosstabs on here and find very different motivations across groups. And generally, I think most of our efforts should be targeted towards the persuadables and the people who are in the group, especially the people who, because this is, like 10% of the group is people who wanted to get the vaccine but just haven't found time to do it yet, right? Or they haven't been able to get the arranged childcare or arranged time off from work, or because they're worried that if they get sick from the vaccine, they're not going to be able to get 2 days off of work while they recover from it, right? If they have a reaction to it. So I am very much in favor of trying to reach those people, but the truth of it is that people who are doing it for ideological reasons is the lion's share of this population. And not only do I think that they can't be reached, I'm not so sure we should expend all that much in terms of resources in trying to reach them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the idea of, at some point, the idea of persuasion has diminishing marginal returns when you have people who believe that Bill Gates is injecting microchips. The amount of persuasion that has to go on for you to get from there to, sure, jab me in the arm, is so high that I'm just not sure why the right answer isn't a little bit more coercive than that. Like, if you want to get on an airplane, if you want to, come into this mall, if you want to, like,
so, this is something I worry about a lot, actually. So when people are, this is starting to be something you see now. A lot of, I think David Frum wrote about this in the Atlantic last week. The idea that we, ought to be doing more sticks now that we've tried carrots. And I'm open to that idea. I am deeply concerned about the politics of that, though. And I would want to see an awful lot of polling on that. And the idea of creating a salient political issue within the minority of the country which is doing this behavior and helping to drive turnout for them and create wedges that help them and hurt the sort of pro-democracy side of the argument. At some point, I become very concerned about the actual, and it's a little bit gross to say this, but I am concerned about the politics of the issue. And if it turns out that vaccine mandates, or however you want to solve it, right, whatever the version of it is, a political loser, then I would not want to spend any political capital on that.
Which is understandable, but there's also a third actor in this equation, and that's private companies and corporations, and maybe we should be incentivizing them to be the holder of the
Yeah,
stick.
it seems to me that the administration has been pretty clever about this, that they say, oh, we're not imposing any federal vaccine mandates except at VA hospitals for healthcare workers, right? We're not doing that. But, if state and local governments and private companies want to do it, take it up with them. And so there's no locus for the political anger as an electoral issue, it's highly diffused throughout a bunch of political actors.
Yeah, and like I said, if the polling on this is fine, because, it ought to be fine, right? I mean, we look at, we're at 60% of the country with, I think, coming up with 60% of the country with at least one dose, and we're really talking about 30%. And of those 30%, it's probably only 60% who are doing it for ideological reasons. But on the other hand, you're coming up on midterm elections, which are really weird, and we're highly polarized. We're segregated by all the coming apart Bill Bishop stuff that everybody knows about. So it worries me, and I don't take any of that for granted.
Daniel, you're not in your chair. You're not blending in with your habitat, but the floor is yours.
I suppose I have two questions. One, are you surprised that Fox News has not been held legally liable for their misinformation about vaccines? And the second, where does the analogy between the crazy conspiracy theories about voting machines and Fox News being held liable, and then their misinformation about vaccines, and we don't see the companies like Pfizer going after Fox News for that type of misinformation?
When you say liable, do you mean like legally accountable for libeling somebody, or do you mean some other kind of liability?
I'm primarily talking about any form of legal liability in which a person could bring a suit for, say, damages as a result of the misinformation about the vaccine, or companies bringing a suit because Fox News is recklessly lying about their product.
Yeah, so I think I can answer this. I mean, the answer is that there's no... The First Amendment is a mighty, mighty product liability standard, and you have to work really hard to violate it as a news organization, to breach it. The companies almost certainly did so with respect to Dominion voting systems, because they and others, because they actually imputed conspiracy to them. To raise questions about, even recklessly, about the integrity of a vaccine, or whether you would want to do it, whether you would want to take it, is not going to get you anywhere near lines of liability, unless you accuse an entity or a person of doing something that is, factually false, and that you could be in reckless disregard of the truth about. And so I don't think they have, legal liability concerns about it. I think as a defamation matter, and I can't think of another liability standard, another basis for liability, merely that they reported bad information that caused you to not get vaccinated and you died as a result, is not ever going to get them close to liability.
Just a little caveat on this. There have been some articles that have been exploring like the tort liability that could come from the detrimental reliance on that misinformation. And so civilly, perhaps, but I agree with Ben that the bar would be extremely high to prove that it was that speaker and that information that caused that person to not get vaccinated.
Yeah, and just for those of you who are mentioning wrongful death actions in the chat, there have been a few of you, giving somebody information that publishing information that causes people to make bad choices is not a plausible basis for a wrongful death suit. Full stop. Mr. Ducks with Pants, the floor is yours.
Hello. Well, it's an honor to meet Mr. J.V. Last, who is a character from the Bulwark Extended Universe, who I primarily know through third-party sources, including the French Village podcast. And my question is whether or not Jonathan has actually watched any of A French Village, or he simply monitors the podcast or Sarah saying anything that is too kind about Ben.
No, Sarah and I have gone around on this over and over and over. I just can't. I mean, I don't have the time. My kids are young. I don't have the time to do series TV. I was able to fit Ted Lasso in, and it was an enormous undertaking for me. And those are 13 22-minute episodes, and I felt that. But B, I've just lived the French Village. I can't have more doom and gloom in my life. I don't want that stuff in my eyeballs, and I'm sure there's a lot to be learned from it. But I'm just not in a place in my life where I have enough spare optimism lying around that I could slog through 115 hours of watching the worst of humanity in a fictionalized environment.
There is much wisdom in this. I have to say, some of my worst 45 minutes of the last 4 months have been spent watching fictitious French Jews being rounded up and put in train cars. Dan Welch, on that cheerful note, the floor is yours.
JVL, we've learned so much about you today. Your early rowing career, your proud father, your Hobbesian view articulated. But what we really want to know, what is Sarah Longwell really like?
She, so Sarah is hard on the outside, soft and chewy on the inside. And she is there. People are always like this, right? They're a little dichotomy. They might be soft on the outside and hard on the inside. I myself am hard on both the outside and the inside. But Sarah has this heart of gold in her. And she does not listen to the show, so I can say this and you guys won't think I'm buttering up. I think she's one of the finest human beings I've ever met. And she, her optimism is really a Ted Lasso-like optimism. It's real. It's not a shtick. It's not a put on. It's not it's just who she is. And she wants to see the best in people. She wants to really see people, because that's Ted Lasso's superpower, right? Is that he can really see people. He doesn't look past them or look through them. And Sarah does that too. And I feel like the world would be better if she could be a senator or president or emperor of the earth or something. Are either of you guys Good Place watchers?
No.
Me. Not did Genevieve, did you do Good Place? Yeah.
I've seen it, yes.
Yeah, so anybody in the chat who has seen Good Place, I'm telling you that I just ordered for her today the Eleanor Shellstrap Best Person sash.
Yes.
Because I have ordered from Etsy. I've found somebody on Etsy who makes these, and I'm getting Sarah I am the best person. It says so on the sash thing. I'm going to send to her because she's the best. She's the best.
Can I venture a simple Sarah Longwell proposition that I think you will agree with?
Sure.
She is exactly the way she presents when she's on the Secret podcast or any of the Bulwark podcasts or on this show or on the French Village. There's no private versus public Sarah Longwell. She's exactly who she seems to be.
Yeah, I think that's right. She's maybe a little more cautious, when she's doing a media of some sort, right? When there's some sort of mediating thing between her and people, she might be a little more cautious in just revealing, opening up, right? And revealing, what she, who she really is and all that.
Sure. I think there's a lot of, that's true of most people. I just mean that there's some people who they have a public persona and then there's who they really are. And those
Yes.
are quite different, either for better or for worse. Sarah is just Sarah. I mean, she's one of the reasons people like her so much on this show is that she comes across as super real, and that's because she is.
Yeah, and I just I fell for her instantly, And when I first met her, as like things were going bad at the Standard, and I was casting about for resources to try to find jobs for the people on my team over there. And I just one of these people where 5 minutes into a phone conversation where I was asking her for help finding jobs for a bunch of 25-year-olds, I just thought, I love this woman. She's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I met her also under ugly circumstances, and not that kind of ugly, but a different kind of ugly. And she is, among other things, when the history of this period is written, and there really is one person who grabbed the attractive remains of the conservative movement by the scruff of its neck and reorganized it, and that is Sarah. And she's that is no small accomplishment, and there's public sides of that and non-public sides of it, and sides that people may never learn about, but one of the reasons she could do that is that she's a magnetic human being, and whether you met her in the context in which you did or the context in which I did, there's just something that comes across very, very quickly that way.
Yeah, she's great, and I always joke with her that the world needs both kinds of people. It needs people like me, and it needs Sarah Longwell, but it needs the Sarah Longwells to be in charge. Like people like me shouldn't be in charge of anything. Like we're important.
You should be the eminence grise whispering. I don't know how to say it in. You whispering the evil inclination into her ear.
Yeah, she's Jedediah Bartlett, and I'm Toby, I guess, right? Or I would be if I could get her to run for president.
That's amazing.
I would be her Toby.
Eve, the floor is yours.
Hi. My question is, what are your thoughts about centrism as a political stance / ideology? You both seems to be guys are kind of centrist. I don't know.
Boy, I don't know. I always assume the worst is about to happen. Here's, if you want to understand, we joke at the Bulwark all the time, because I will pop into our Slack and I'll be like, hey, look at this thing just happened. JVL is always right, and
it's always a bad thing that just
right.
happened.
Well, some people, I will periodically get people, who email. All these things come from readers who are like, look at this thing. How did you know? And I say, it's easy. In any given situation, I look at it and I think, what's the worst possible thing that could happen next? And then I say, that's what's going to happen. And I'm right, like 95% of the time. And so I begin by, a lot of the pundit fallacy is always to look at the world, think about what you would like to see happen, and then to build a framework for how what you want will happen, right? And I sort of do the opposite. I look at the world, I think about what I would like to see happen, and then I try to come up with the reasons why it won't. And that's basically where I am with centrism. I think we have, our system is set up with so much leverage on one side for the minority party. Between the Senate, and this is something that's a reasonably new view for me. I did not, I've been reading this critique from people like Ezra Klein for 10 years and didn't quite buy it, and now I really do. That between gerrymandering the Electoral College and the Senate, we really have stacked the deck on one side and empowered a minority, and that the net effect of that is to give that minority the freedom to range further out to the polls. And I don't know that the opposite reaction to that is necessarily to create a centrist coalition. Maybe it would be, right? Maybe you could say, look, if you could just get 54% of the country, on the side of reasonable, center-left policies, then, you could reign supreme for a generation. But I don't know that that's really where we're headed. It would be nice, but we can't have nice things.
Drew Rickett, I cannot bring you on screen, but your Your mic is on and the floor is yours.
Yes, I'm a disembodied voice, as usual. So, JVL, you wrote an article in the immediate aftermath of 1/6 questioning whether or not the insurrection was an epilogue or a prologue of Trumpism, and I was wondering if you had any thoughts 6 months on, or are you reserving that for a forthcoming article?
No, I have to go back and look at it, but I'm pretty sure that was one of those leading questions where I knew what it was, and I thought it was prologue, and I still believe it's prologue, and I think it's even worse than I had thought at the time, because what we really do have now a party which is moving toward a full embrace of political violence. Right now it's not true like that the entire Republican Party embraces the idea of political violence. It is only fill in the percent, right? And maybe that percent is 5%, maybe it's 50%. I don't know. But that minority is gaining purchase, and more than that, there are no forces within the party who are interested in pushing back against them. And once that happens, I mean, Katie, bar the door, right? These things. This is my central argument from the very beginning of Trumpism. Has always been something that I believed, really going back to 9/11, is that this thing of ours, this thing being our nice little Western liberal construct, in which we try to protect everybody's dignity and freedom, we try to protect both the rights of the minority and the majority. This thing that we take as given is much more fragile than we think. And, you just start tapping on this stuff a little bit and it can crack, and those cracks don't look like they're that important until all of a sudden everything collapses. And I have been basically of that view since 9/11, and I've become increasingly of that view over the last 5 or 6 years too.
Amen. Matteo, you get the last question. I suggest, you have so many in there, but I suggest the sporting one is the money question of the day.
Yeah. No, I think it's the one we all want to see. And so my question is, I want to hear from all of you on this. What is the most impressive athletic feat that you could do today if you had to?
Genevieve, get us started.
That I could personally perform?
Yes. Let's just say under normal conditions.
Thank you. I am an excellent swimmer, and I am very good at the butterfly stroke, so I feel like I would beat a lot of people in a butterfly race.
I play a lot of catch with my oldest kid, and have been since he was about 5 years old. So I can throw a baseball better than most middle-aged guys, just because I still do it a lot. So I don't have the velocity of my kid. My kid's 13, and his fastball is 76, 77 miles an hour, which is insane and terrifying. When we go out to play catch now, if it starts getting like dusk, I have to stop us, because if the light isn't perfect and I miss it, he's going to break my face with the ball. But I can still throw from short to first.
I can break 5 boards stacked on top of each other, and and Jack Goldsmith once even posted a picture on Lawfare of it, but it looks like the picture is no longer available on the site. I'll have to go find out what happened to that picture. But yeah, somebody snapped a picture of me going through 5 boards.
But full on Chuck Norris style.
It was a palm strike. Yeah, it was like that. But they all went, and there's a beautiful picture of it.
What is the secret? How does one do that? Are you harnessing the power of your chi, or what?
No, you start with 1 board, and then you do 2, and then you kind of work your way up. There's no secret to it. You hit it really hard, and it hurts. But yeah, if I needed to break 5 boards today, I could do that.
You win.
I don't know. I don't think I could beat Genevieve in a breaststroke race.
No, you win. Breaking 5 again. Sarah's going to hear that. And she'll be like, "Oh, you break 5 boards. I love it."
It is 6:01, and that means I am already a minute in default of my hard stop commitment to JVL to end on time today. We will be back tomorrow. It will be cheese night a day early, right, Genevieve?
That's correct. We're doing it a early in rendition.
Yeah. So that'll be 22 hours and 59 minutes from now. Jonathan V. Last, you're a great American, and it's been a pleasure talking to you. Come back and join us sometime.
Anytime.
Yes.
Thank you for having me, guys. It's very, very sweet of you.
And until tomorrow, Genevieve.
We don't have fun anymore, but we do have a future where we could build a centrist coalition where Sarah Longwell could be president.
Whoa. And yes, somebody just shared, Steve Buenapane just shared a picture of the 5-board break from Twitter. We will see you all tomorrow. Thank you.